The coffee was stale, and the vinyl on the booths was cracked. But for Olivia Vance, the Starlight Diner was her whole world, a world of $2 tips and overdue rent notices. She never expected him to walk in. Julian Thorne, a man whose face was plastered on Forbes, a billionaire who lived in a glass tower overlooking Central Park. He looked at her like she was dirt. Minutes later, he was on the floor, dying. Olivia had a choice: walk away from the man who just insulted her, or save him. She chose to save him, and that was the beginning of her nightmare. The Starlight Diner smelled of old coffee and bleach. At 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, the lunch rush was long dead, leaving only the dregs. A few construction workers nursing lukewarm beers and Old Man Hemlock, who was meticulously separating the peas on his shepherd's pie. Olivia Vance wiped down the Formica countertop, her reflection staring back at her from the chrome napkin dispenser. She looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that had lost its enthusiasm hours ago. Her apron, once white, was a battlefield map of ketchup, mustard, and grease. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look. It was another text from her landlord. Rent. Final notice. She sighed, dumping a basket of fries for Ben, the cook. "That's the last of the lunch orders, Ben. I'm taking my break." "Go for it, E," he grunted, not looking up from his flat-top grill. Olivia sank onto a stool, pulling her nursing textbook from her backpack. Pathophysiology. She'd been stuck on the same chapter about cardiac arrhythmias for 3 weeks. She'd had to drop out of her program at Columbia Nursing 2 years ago, when her mother got sick, and the mountain of debt she'd accrued felt less like a loan and more like a life sentence. The diner job, which was supposed to be temporary, had become a quicksand trap. The diner bell jingled, a sharp, intrusive sound in the afternoon quiet. Olivia looked up, her practiced "Welcome to the Starlight" dying on her lips. The man standing in the doorway didn't belong. He wasn't a construction worker, or a lost tourist, or a weary regular. He was wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His shoes were polished obsidian, and his watch, a sleek Patek Philippe, glinted under the flickering fluorescent lights. He had sharp, aristocratic features, silver-grey hair brushed back from his temples, and eyes the color of a winter sky. It was Julian Thorne. Olivia knew the face. Everyone knew the face. He was the CEO of Thorne Dynamics, a man who built and broke empires before breakfast. He owned half of downtown. He looked around the diner with an expression of profound disgust, his gaze sweeping over the cracked linoleum and landing on Olivia. He didn't speak, just gestured with one imperious finger toward the cleanest booth. Olivia stiffened. She grabbed a menu, her exhaustion replaced by a low thrum of indignation. She walked over, placing the menu on the table. "What can I get for you?" Julian Thorne didn't even look at it. He was staring out the window, his jaw tight. "Coffee, black." "Coming right up," Olivia said, her voice clipped. She returned with the heavy ceramic mug. As she set it down, her hand brushed a small puddle of spilled water on the table. A few drops splashed onto the sleeve of his suit. Julian recoiled as if she'd thrown acid on him. He shot her a look of pure venom. "Watch what you're doing, girl," he snapped, his voice a low growl. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and meticulously dabbed at the microscopic water spots. Olivia felt her face flush. "It was water. I'm sorry." "Yes, well, your incompetence is noted," he said dismissively, turning back to the window. Olivia stood there for a second, her hands balled into fists. She wanted to tell him where he could shove his coffee. She wanted to remind him that he was the one in her diner. But the rent notice flashed in her mind. She turned on her heel and marched back to the counter, her pride stinging. "Jerk," she muttered to Ben. "Rich ones always are," Ben replied, scraping the grill. Olivia went back to her textbook, trying to force the words on the page to make sense. She read the same sentence 4 times. Ventricular fibrillation is a life-threatening arrhythmia. A sudden, violent clatter made her jump. She looked over. Old man Hemlock was staring, his mouth open. Julian Thorne was no longer sitting upright. He had slumped forward, his head hitting the table. The coffee mug had smashed on the floor. "Sir?" Olivia called out. He didn't move. She rushed over. "Sir? Mr. Thorne?" She touched his shoulder. He was rigid. His face was a terrifying shade of bluish-grey. His eyes were wide, unseeing. "Ben, call 911 now!" Olivia shouted, her voice ringing with an authority she didn't know she possessed. She grabbed Julian Thorne's heavy, expensive body and hauled him out of the booth, carefully lowering him to the dirty floor. The construction workers were frozen, watching. "He's not breathing!" Olivia yelled. She put her ear to his mouth. Nothing. She felt for a carotid pulse. Faint. Thready. Gone. "He's in arrest." The dusty, stale air of the diner evaporated. The textbook pages flashed in her mind. Ventricular fibrillation. She knew exactly what this was. Olivia placed the heel of one hand on the center of his chest, over his ridiculously expensive tie. She laced her fingers, locked her elbows, and began to push. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, she counted aloud, her voice steady, cutting through the panic. The sound of his ribs cracking under her hands made one of the construction workers gag, but Olivia didn't flinch. "Ben, is the ambulance coming? They're on their way. 5 minutes." "I don't have 5 minutes," she grunted, the effort making her sweat. She was small, and he was a solid, heavy man. Her arms screamed in protest. "Push hard. Push fast." She continued the compressions, her world shrinking to the space between her hands and his sternum. She was no longer Olivia the waitress. She was Olivia the almost nurse. She was fighting. "Come on," she whispered, tears of frustration and effort welling in her eyes. "Don't you die on me, you arrogant old. Come on." She compressed and compressed and compressed. 1 minute, 2, 3. Her arms felt like they were on fire. Her back was seizing. Just as she felt she couldn't possibly push one more time, she heard the sirens. 2 paramedics burst through the door with a gurney and a defibrillator. "Move!" one of them yelled. Olivia scrambled back, collapsing against the leg of a table, her chest heaving. "What have we got?" the paramedic asked, slapping pads on Julian's chest. "Male, approx 60s. Witnessed V-fib arrest," Olivia panted, the medical terminology flowing naturally. "I started CPR immediately, performed continuous compressions for approximately 4 minutes. The paramedic looked at her, surprised. "No pulse. Charging. Clear." Julian Thorne's body arched off the floor as the electricity shot through him. The monitor beeped. A flat line. "Again. Charging. Clear." Another violent jolt. The monitor beeped. And then a rhythm. Slow, weak, but it was there. "We have a rhythm. Sinus Brady. Let's get him tubed and push one of epi." They worked fast, a whirlwind of professional action. As they loaded him onto the gurney, Julian Thorne's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, confused, and they locked directly onto Olivia. She was still on the floor, covered in his coffee, and her own sweat, her knuckles raw. He stared at her. There was no gratitude in his eyes, no fear, just a cold, piercing, analytical intensity. It was the look of a predator trying to understand a new species. Then the paramedics wheeled him out the door, and he was gone. Olivia Vance was left kneeling on the floor of the Starlight Diner, her arms shaking so badly she couldn't stand up. Old Man Hemlock finally broke the silence. "Well," he said, picking up his fork, "my pie's cold." The next 24 hours were a blur. The police came. Olivia, running on pure adrenaline, gave her statement. Ben and the other patrons confirmed her story. She was methodical, precise, using the same detached tone she'd been taught in her clinicals. Then the media arrived. By the time Olivia's shift ended, a swarm of news vans was parked outside the diner. Microphones were shoved in her face. "Olivia Vance, is it true you saved Julian Thorne? What was it like? Did he say anything to you? Are you a hero?" Olivia was terrified. She shoved her way through the cameras, her head down. "I just did what anyone would have done," she muttered, climbing into her sputtering 15-year-old Honda Civic and speeding away. She drove to her tiny, garden-level apartment, where the landlord's notice was now taped to her door, flapping aggressively. She tore it down, her hands still shaking. She turned on the local news. Her face was on the screen, a grainy cell phone video someone in the diner had taken. There she was, a frantic angel in a dirty apron, pounding on the chest of one of the richest men in the world. The billionaire, Julian Thorne, was rushed to Weill Cornell Medical Center, the anchorwoman said, where he is currently in critical but stable condition. His survival is being credited to the quick thinking of this woman, waitress, and former nursing student Olivia Vance. Olivia sank onto her lumpy sofa. Former nursing student. The word stung more than hero helped. She expected something. A phone call? A thank you from a family member? Nothing came. The next day, the diner was a zoo. People came in not to eat, but to see her. They pointed and whispered. Her boss, Mrs. Albright, was thrilled by the new business, but Olivia felt like an animal in a cage. A man in a suit, a different suit, this one less expensive than Julian Thorne's, but still leagues above the diner's usual clientele, sat at the counter. He ordered a coffee and watched her for an hour. Olivia tried to ignore him, but his stare was unnerving. A few days passed. The initial media frenzy died down. The news reported that Julian Thorne was recovering well. The whispers at the diner faded back into the usual hum of gossip. Olivia's life returned to its grueling, debt-ridden normal. The gratitude she had secretly hoped for, not money necessarily, but acknowledgement, never materialized. A week after the incident, Olivia was counting the pennies in her tip jar, trying to figure out if she could pay her electricity bill or her water bill, but not both. The diner bell jingled. Olivia didn't look up. "Welcome to the Starlight. Take any booth." "Ms. Vance?" The voice was smooth, cold, and laced with legal precision. She looked up. It was not Julian Thorne. It was a man in his late 50s, with a face like polished granite and wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a pristine leather briefcase. "I am Arthur Graves," the man said, sliding a business card across the counter. "Graves, Adler and Finch, LLP. I represent Mr. Julian Thorne." Olivia's heart did a strange little flip. "Is he okay?" "Mr. Thorne is making a full recovery, thanks in no small part to your prompt intervention," Mr. Graves said. The word prompt sounded like an accusation. He opened his briefcase. "Mr. Thorne values his privacy above all else. The media attention surrounding this unfortunate incident has been distasteful." He slid a thick sheaf of papers toward her, bound in a blue legal cover. "This is a non-disclosure agreement," Graves continued, his voice a monotone. "It stipulates that you will not speak, write, or otherwise communicate about the events of last Tuesday with any media outlet, publishing house, film studio, or private individual in perpetuity." Olivia stared at the document. "You want me to shut up?" "A crude but accurate summary," Graves said, unfazed. "Mr. Thorne does not like loose ends. You are a loose end." Olivia felt that same flush of anger she'd felt when Julian Thorne had snapped at her. "I haven't talked to anyone. I told them all I had no comment. And Mr. Thorne appreciates that. Which is why," Graves said, pulling a long, thin envelope from his briefcase, "he is prepared to offer this as a token of his gratitude." He pushed the envelope toward her. Olivia didn't touch it. "What is it?" "A certified check for $5,000. Olivia looked at the envelope. $5,000. It would pay her rent for 6 months. It would clear her utility bills. It would be a breathing room she hadn't had in years, and it felt like the biggest insult of her life. $5,000, Olivia repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "For his life, and my silence. It is a generous offer, Miss Vance. I advise you to take it. It is, I assure you, the only offer." Olivia looked at the lawyer, at his smug, passionless face. She thought of the sound of Julian Thorne's ribs cracking under her hands. She thought of the sheer, primal terror of holding a man's life in her palms. She thought of him looking at her with those cold, calculating eyes. He didn't see a person who had saved him. He saw a problem to be managed, a bit of unpleasantness to be paid off and swept under the rug. Slowly, Olivia picked up the check. She looked at the crisp paper, the official bank logo, the zeros. Then she tore it in half. Mr. Graves's composure finally broke. His eyes widened, and a faint spot of color appeared on his cheeks. She tore it in half again, and let the pieces fall onto the countertop like confetti. "Miss Vance," Graves hissed, "I don't think you understand." "No, Mr. Graves, I think you don't understand," Olivia said, her voice shaking but strong. "I didn't do it for money. I did it because he was a human being who was dying. I don't want his token. And I don't need to sign his disgusting agreement, because I have nothing to say about him." She pushed the stack of unread NDA papers back across the counter. "You can tell Mr. Thorne," she said, leaning in, "that I'm glad he's alive. And you can tell him that his life is worth a hell of a lot more than $5,000, but my integrity isn't for sale." Arthur Graves stared at the pile of paper and the pieces of the check. His face was unreadable. He slowly, meticulously gathered the documents, placed them back in his briefcase, and snapped it shut. He stood up, adjusting his suit. "You are making a very foolish mistake, Miss Vance," he said. "Get out of my diner," Olivia replied. When he was gone, Olivia's knees gave out, and she had to grip the counter to stay upright. She had just torn up more money than she made in 2 months. She was terrified, and for the first time in a long time, she was proud. Across town, in a sterile white hospital room on the penthouse floor of Weill Cornell, Julian Thorne was watching the city lights flicker to life. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic beep of his heart monitor. Arthur Graves stood by the bed, recounting the meeting at the diner. "And then she tore up the check, Mr. Thorne, told me her integrity wasn't for sale." Julian Thorne was silent for a long moment. A small, dry smile played on his lips. It was not a kind expression. "She tore it up," he repeated. "Into 4 pieces, sir." "Extraordinary," Julian mused. $5,000. To a girl like that, it must be a fortune. She is principled, or profoundly stupid. I'm not sure which. "Principles are just leverage we haven't found a way to use yet," Julian said, his voice a low rasp. "What did we find out about her?" Graves consulted a file. Olivia Vance, 26, dropped out of Columbia nursing 2 years ago. Reason: mother's medical bills. Ovarian cancer. Mother passed last year. Vance was left with her own student debt, plus the outstanding medical debt. Total liability, just over $200,000. Works full-time at the Starlight Diner. Landlord is filing for eviction. She is, by all definitions, desperate. Desperate, Julian echoed, and yet she tore up the check. He looked out the window. He hadn't built his empire by trusting people. He'd built it by understanding them. He understood greed, fear, and ambition. He did not understand this. She's a loose end, Arthur. I don't like them. We can increase the offer. 20,000. 50. No, Julian said. Money is a blunt instrument. This girl, she requires a different approach. She's either a saint or the most clever gold digger I've ever met. I intend to find out which. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young, handsome man in a suit as sharp as Julian's, but flashier, walked in. He had dark, restless eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. Uncle, the man said, his voice booming with false sincerity. You look... well, the Grim Reaper decided to pass you over, I see. Marcus, Julian said, his voice turning to ice. My dear nephew, come to check if I've updated my will. Marcus Thorne laughed, a short, barking sound. Always the cynic. I was worried. We were all worried. He gestured vaguely, as if we were a crowd behind him. Marcus was the son of Julian's late brother, and the heir apparent to Thorne dynamics. He was also a reckless, impatient man who saw the company as his personal piggy bank. I'm fine, Julian said, thanks to a waitress. Marcus's smile tightened. Ah, yes. The angel of the starlight. The press is having a field day. It's a PR nightmare, Julian. Makes you look weak, collapsing in a greasy spoon. I was dying, Marcus. It's generally considered a weak position. Which is why we need to handle this, Marcus said, pulling a chair closer. This Olivia Vance. She's a problem. She's a former nursing student with a mountain of debt. She saves a billionaire. The lawsuit is writing itself. Emotional distress, lost wages, negligence. She hasn't sued, Graves interjected quietly. In fact, she refused a $5,000 settlement and an NDA this afternoon. Marcus looked genuinely shocked. She refused? Why? She said her integrity wasn't for sale, Julian said, watching his nephew's face. Marcus scoffed. Please, she's holding out for a bigger payday. She's playing you, Uncle. She knows the press is on her side. She's waiting for you to offer her 7 figures to shut her up. You think so? Julian asked, his voice neutral. I know so, Marcus said, leaning in. People like her. They're rats. They see a crumb, and they want the whole loaf. Let me handle her. I'll get her to sign. I'll find her price. Julian looked at his nephew's eager, predatory face. Then he looked at his lawyer. No, Marcus, Julian said. I'll handle Miss Vance. You handle the quarterly reports. I believe they're already overdue. Marcus's face darkened, but he quickly masked it with his oily smile. Of course, Uncle. Just trying to protect the family. Get some rest. He walked out, his expensive cologne lingering in the sterile air. When he was gone, Julian looked at Graves. Marcus is right about one thing. She is a problem, but not for the reasons he thinks. Sir, she interests me, Arthur. Find out everything. Where she banks, who she talks to, what she eats for breakfast. I want to know what makes Olivia Vance tick. And what should I do with the information? Julian Thorne smiled, that cold, dry smile again. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. We're going to see just how strong that integrity of hers really is. Olivia's life, already difficult, began to unravel with terrifying speed. It started at the diner. Mrs. Albright, her boss of 3 years, called her into the back office. She looked nervous. "Olivia, honey, I don't know how to say this," she stammered, wringing her hands. "The diner's been sold." Olivia's stomach dropped. "What? To who?" "Some big corporate holding company. Starlight Hospitality, LLC. I'd never heard of them. It was a cash offer, way over market. I had to take it, Olivia. My husband's medical bills. No, I get it, Mrs. Albright. I do. So, am I fired?" No. They're keeping all the staff. But there's a new manager starting Monday. A Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark arrived on Monday, and he was the anti-Mrs. Albright. He was a thin, pinched man with a clipboard and a perpetual sneer. He immediately instituted a new set of rules. "Rule 1, he announced to the staff. "No more free meals. All employees will pay 50% for any food consumed on premises." Ben, the cook, immediately threatened to quit. "Rule 2, all shifts are being re-evaluated. Seniority means nothing. Efficiency means everything." Olivia, who had always worked the coveted day shift, was suddenly put on the graveyard shift, midnight to 8 a.m. The tips were non-existent. Rule 3. All customer complaints will result in an immediate written warning. 3 warnings and you are terminated. No exceptions. The diner's atmosphere turned toxic overnight. The regulars, sensing the change, stopped coming in. They were replaced by drunk college kids and exhausted truck drivers who tipped $1 on a $30 check. Olivia's income was cut in half. She started looking for other waitressing jobs, but it was as if she'd been blacklisted. She went to 3 interviews at other restaurants. The moment they saw her name on the application, the managers would get a sudden phone call and come back to tell her the position had just been filled. She was trapped. Her landlord, who had been placated by a small partial payment, was now actively pursuing eviction. The new court date was set. She had 3 weeks. Panic began to set in, a cold, clawing thing in her chest. She was failing. She sold her mother's last piece of jewelry, a simple gold locket, to keep her lights on. She started skipping meals, telling Ben she wasn't hungry. One night, during a dead quiet 3 a.m. shift, Mr. Clark called her over. "Vance," he snapped. "Table 4. They said their coffee was cold." "I just poured it," Olivia protested. "Are you calling the customer a liar?" Clark said, his eyes glittering. "That's a written warning. That's not fair. Fair is a word for children and socialists, Vance. Get them a new coffee. And this," he said, tapping his clipboard, "will be reflected in your next paycheck. We're docking you for the wasted product." Olivia went back to the coffee pot, her hands shaking with rage. She was being pushed, methodically and deliberately, toward a cliff. This wasn't bad luck. This was personal. She thought of Julian Thorne. She thought of his cold, assessing stare. This had his fingerprints all over it. He was punishing her for refusing his money, for bruising his ego. He couldn't buy her, so he was going to break her. The thought made her sick, but it also hardened something inside her. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She would scrub floors. She would work 20-hour days. She would not break. 2 weeks later, she was at her absolute lowest. She was down to the last $20 in her bank account. The eviction was in 2 days. She was sitting in her cold apartment, bundled in a blanket, staring at her useless nursing textbook. There was a knock on the door. She tensed. It wasn't the landlord. He didn't knock. She looked through the peephole. It was Arthur Graves, the lawyer. He was standing in the dimly lit, peeling paint hallway of her building, looking even more disgusted than Julian Thorne had looked in the diner. She opened the door, pulling her blanket around her like armor. "Miss Vance," he said, not offering a greeting. "May I come in?" "No," Olivia said. "What do you want?" Graves sighed as if her poverty was a personal inconvenience. "I have been authorized by Mr. Thorne to make you a second and final offer." He pulled the familiar, thin envelope from his briefcase. "Inside, you will find a new non-disclosure agreement. You will also find a certified check for $100,000. Olivia's breath hitched. $100,000. It would pay her eviction. It would pay her debts. It would let her re-enroll in school. It was everything. "He knows," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "He knows what's been happening to me. The diner, the other jobs, my apartment. He did this. He did this to me." Mr. Graves's face was a perfect mask of neutrality. "I am not privy to Mr. Thorne's personal affairs. I am only authorized to deliver this offer. He believes you will find it sufficient. This time. This is the test," Olivia thought. "He backs me into a corner, starves me out, and then sees if my integrity is still for sale. This is his game." She looked at the envelope in the lawyer's hand. She saw a way out. She saw heat and food and security. And then she saw Julian Thorne's smug, cold smile. She met Mr. Graves's eyes. "Tell Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a steel rod, "that my answer is still no. And if either of you ever come near me, my diner, or my home again, I will go to every news station in this city and tell them exactly what kind of monster he is. I will tell them how he pays off the people who save him and how he destroys the ones who won't." She had nothing left to lose. The fear was gone, replaced by a white-hot, cleansing anger. "Now get off my property." Arthur Graves looked at her for a full 10 seconds. He did not look angry. He looked impressed. He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin. "As you wish, Miss Vance." He turned and walked away. Olivia shut the door, slid to the floor, and for the first time since her mother died, she burst into tears. In his penthouse study, a room walled in glass that overlooked a sleeping Central Park, Julian Thorne listened to Arthur Graves's report. "And she threatened to go to the press. She called you a monster, sir." And then she slammed the door. Julian swirled the brandy in his glass. He was out of the hospital, but still weak. A private nurse, a stern woman named Nurse Davies, monitored him 24/7. $100,000, Julian mused. And she's 2 days from eviction. Remarkable. "She is an anomaly, sir," Graves said. "She is, isn't she?" Julian said. He felt a strange, unfamiliar emotion. It wasn't anger, it was respect. "All right, Arthur. The game is over. Call off Clark at the diner. Pay her landlord, anonymously. Settle her debts." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Sir? After she threatened you?" "She didn't threaten me, Arthur. She defended herself. There's a difference. I pushed a cornered animal, and it had the decency to bite me instead of cower. I'm done testing her. It's time to apologize." "Apologize, sir?" "I'm not familiar with the procedure." "You'll learn," Julian said with a rare, genuine smile. "For now, just fix it and arrange a meeting. I want to talk to her. Here." "Very good, sir." As Graves left, Nurse Davies entered, carrying a small tray. "It's time for your medication, Mr. Thorne, and your evening tea." "Leave the medication, nurse. I'm tired of being poked," Julian grumbled. "Doctor's orders," she said sternly, handing him 2 pills and a small cup of water. He downed them. "But the tea," she said, "was a special request. Your nephew Marcus had it delivered. He said it's your favorite, a special herbal blend from his trip to Asia." She poured the steaming, fragrant liquid from a small, ornate iron pot into a cup. Julian looked at it. Marcus hadn't done anything thoughtful in his entire life. "He said it would help you." "Recover," Nurse Davies added, a little uncertainly. "Did he?" Julian said, his eyes narrowing. He picked up the cup, smelled it. It had a faint, bitter almond scent beneath the jasmine. He remembered his collapse. It had been so sudden. He was 65, but he was in excellent health. His doctors at Weill Cornell had been baffled. They'd blamed a congenital heart defect that had never shown up before. It had felt wrong. "Nurse," Julian said, setting the cup down. "I'm feeling rather tired. Would you mind fetching my doctor? Dr. Evans. Tell him it's urgent." "But Mr. Thorne, it's 10 p.m. "Now please, and do not, under any circumstances, mention this to my nephew." The nurse, sensing the steel in his voice, hurried out. Julian looked at the cup of tea. He thought about Marcus's eagerness in the hospital. "Let me handle her." "Makes you look weak." He poured a small amount of the tea into his empty water glass. When the nurse was gone, he capped it and hid it in his desk drawer. When Dr. Evans arrived an hour later, looking annoyed and sleepy, Julian handed him the glass. "Test this, Alan," Julian said, his voice grim. "Test it for everything, and pull my original toxicology report from the day I was admitted." "Julian, what is this? You look pale." "I was dying, Alan. Not weak, not congenital. I was poisoned, and I think my dear nephew just tried to finish the job." Dr. Evans ran the tests. The results came back at 3 a.m. The doctor was white as a sheet. "It's God, Julian. It's aconite, wolf's bane, mixed with a high-dose beta blocker. The combination is almost undetectable. It mimics a massive, sudden cardiac arrest." Julian Thorne sat back in his chair. The blood drained from his face. "The original collapse," Julian whispered. "It wasn't random. Your tox screen from the hospital. It's here," Dr. Evans said, his hands shaking as he held the printout. "We missed it. We were looking for anticoagulants, standard stuff. But it's here. The same compounds. Trace amounts, but identical." Julian stared at the park. The pretty lights. His nephew, his own brother's son, had tried to murder him. He had collapsed in that diner because Marcus had been poisoning him for weeks, waiting for the right moment. And Olivia, with her CPR, had ruined the plan. And then his blood ran truly cold. Marcus's insistence on handling Olivia. It wasn't about a lawsuit. It was about silencing a witness, the attacks on her job, the threats, the eviction. Marcus was trying to destroy her, to make her disappear. And when Julian had started his own test, he had unknowingly provided the perfect cover for Marcus's own sinister plot. Julian had been playing checkers while his nephew was playing chess. "My God," Julian said. "He's not just trying to get rid of her. He's trying to kill her." He grabbed his phone. "Arthur, get to Olivia Vance's apartment, now. Get her out of there. Don't take no for an answer. Bring her to the backup penthouse, and put my entire personal security detail on her. Sir, what's happening?" "Marcus is trying to kill me, Arthur, and she's the only person who's been in his way." Olivia was asleep, fitfully, on her sofa. She hadn't bothered to change out of her diner uniform. She was too exhausted to care. A frantic, heavy pounding echoed through her apartment door. She shot upright, her heart hammering. It was 4 a.m. This wasn't the landlord. "Miss Vance! Olivia Vance! Open this door! It's Arthur Graves!" She stumbled to the door, her mind fogged with sleep and fear. "Go away! Miss Vance, I implore you!" Graves's voice was no longer cold or smooth. It was strained, urgent. "You are in terrible danger. Please, I'm not here to serve you papers. I'm here to save your life." She hesitated, then looked through the peephole. Graves was there, but he wasn't alone. 2 massive men in dark suits stood behind him, scanning the hallway. They looked like Secret Service agents. This was not a legal visit. She fumbled with the deadbolt and opened the door. "What is going on?" "There is no time to explain," Graves said, stepping inside. "Grab your coat, grab your wallet. You cannot stay here." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Olivia said, backing away. "Mr. Thorne's nephew, Marcus, has been attempting to poison him," Graves said, the words spilling out in a rush. "His collapse at the diner was not an accident. It was attempted murder. You interrupted it. Marcus has been trying to neutralize you ever since. He's the one who got you fired. He's the one who bought the diner. He's the one who's been trying to ruin you. Mr. Thorne only just found out." Olivia stared at him, her mind unable to process the words. "Poison. Marcus. He thought I knew. He thought you were a threat, a loose end, and he was going to cut it. Now, we must go." One of the bodyguards gently but firmly took her arm. "Mum, please." Numbly, Olivia grabbed her backpack and her keys. They hustled her out of the building and into a black, armored Escalade that was idling at the curb. They drove in silence through the dark, empty streets of New York. The car didn't go to Weill Cornell. It didn't go to Julian's main penthouse. It went to a discreet, impossibly tall glass tower in Tribeca. They rode a private elevator to the very top. The doors opened into a sprawling apartment that was more art gallery than home. Julian Thorne was standing by the window, wearing a silk dressing gown. He looked older, more fragile than he had in the diner, but his eyes were burning with a terrifying intensity. "Miss Vance," he said. "Olivia. Thank you for coming." Olivia was shaking, a combination of cold, fear, and sheer confusion. You tested me. You tried to break me." "Yes," Julian said, his voice heavy with a shame she never thought possible from him. "I did. It was despicable. I saw integrity, and my first instinct was to see what it would take to shatter it. I was a fool." He stepped closer. "But my nephew, he wasn't testing you, Olivia. He was hunting you. While I was playing my idiotic games, he was trying to bury you, or worse." "He poisoned you," Olivia whispered, the reality of it finally sinking in. "He's been poisoning me for months. You saved my life. You didn't just restart my heart, Miss Vance. You reset the clock on his entire plan. You gave me the time I needed to see the truth." He gestured to the opulent room. "You are safe here. My men are downstairs. No one, not even Marcus, knows this location exists." Olivia sank into a chair that was probably worth more than her apartment. What happens now?" "Now," Julian said, a predatory glint returning to his eye. "We stop playing defense. I have spent my life building an empire. I will not let a sociopathic child take it from me, and I will not let him harm the one person in this entire God-forced city who has proven trustworthy." "You want my help?" Olivia asked, incredulous. "I'm a waitress." "You're the only person he doesn't see coming," Julian said. "My board, my lawyers, my staff, they're all compromised. He has spies everywhere. But you're invisible to him. You're the poor waitress. He thinks you're either bought off or broken. So what do you want me to do?" "I need proof. I have the tox reports, but I need to link him to the purchase. I need to know how he did it. The tea. Who delivered it? How did he get it into my diet? I need a witness. And I think I know how to find one." He looked at Olivia, his gaze measuring. "You're a nurse, Miss Vance. Or you were. You know how to talk to a hospital staff. You know how to be overlooked." A plan began to form, a wild, dangerous, and brilliant plan. It was a plan built on the alliance of two people who, a week ago, had despised each other. The billionaire and the waitress. "Tell me what to do," Olivia said, her fear finally giving way to resolve. The plan was simple, and that's what made it so dangerous. Marcus Thorne felt safe. He believed his uncle was still a weak, recovering invalid, and that Olivia Vance was a non-threat, a piece of trash swept aside. He was wrong on both counts. First, Julian made a public and very loud move. He announced an emergency leave of absence from Thorne Dynamics, citing his declining health. He placed Marcus as acting CEO, giving his nephew the exact thing he'd been killing for. "Let him have the chair," Julian growled, watching the business news report from the Tribeca safe house. "Let him get comfortable. Pride comes before the fall." Marcus, emboldened and arrogant, immediately began throwing his weight around. He fired several executives loyal to Julian and started liquidating certain assets, Julian's pet projects. This was the distraction. Meanwhile, Olivia went to work. Julian had paid off her debts. He had bought her a new professional wardrobe. But for this, she went back to her roots. She put on a set of plain, light blue scrubs, a fake Weill Cornell ID badge that Arthur Graves had procured, and a pair of comfortable sneakers. She wasn't Olivia, the waitress who saved Julian Thorne. She was just Elle, a temp agency nurse filling in a shift. She went to the cardiac penthouse floor where Julian had stayed. She carried a clipboard and a friendly, tired smile. She blended in perfectly. The nurses were overworked. They barely looked at her. She was looking for one person, Nurse Davies, the woman who had served Julian the poisoned tea. She found her in the staff break room, rubbing her temples. "Long shift?" Olivia asked, pouring herself a cup of the break room's terrible coffee. "You have no idea," Nurse Davies sighed. "The agency sent you? We've been short-staffed ever since Mr. Thorne left." "Tough patient?" Olivia asked casually. Nurse Davies scoffed. "He was fine. It's his family. That nephew of his, Marcus. Creepy. He was always hanging around, asking questions about his uncle's meds, his diet." Olivia's pulse quickened. "Really? Seems attentive?" "Attentive? No, he was slimy. He kept giving me tips. Big ones." She lowered her voice. "He gave me $500 to make sure his uncle drank a special tea that night. Said it was a family remedy. I thought it was weird, but $500 is $500, you know? I'm a single mum." "I get it," Olivia said, her voice full of empathy. "But what if that tea was bad?" Nurse Davies's face went pale. "What do you mean, bad? The doctors signed off on his discharge. He's fine." "He's not fine," Olivia said, dropping the pretense. "He's in hiding. That tea was poisoned. Marcus has been trying to kill him." The nurse looked like she was going to be sick. "Oh my God. Oh my God. He used me. I could go to jail. I could lose my license. I could lose my son." "He's counting on you being too scared to talk," Olivia said, putting a hand on her arm. "But Julian Thorne knows you didn't do it on purpose. He's not after you. He's after him. He needs your help. He needs your testimony." I can't. Marcus Thorne, he's powerful. He'll destroy me." "He will destroy you if you stay silent," Olivia said, her voice hard. "He'll pin it all on you, the disgruntled nurse. But if you come with me, right now, Julian Thorne will protect you. He'll put you under the same protection I'm under. He'll make sure you and your son are safe for life." Nurse Davies looked at Olivia, her eyes wide with terror. She saw the truth. She saw the trap she was in. "Okay," the nurse whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell them everything." Olivia got her out of the hospital through a service exit. An hour later, Nurse Davies was with Arthur Graves, signing a sworn affidavit. They had him. The next day, Julian Thorne called an emergency meeting of the board of directors of Thorne Dynamics. The boardroom on the 80th floor was packed. The mood was tense. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table, in his uncle's chair, a smug, reptilian smile on his face. He assumed this meeting was a formality to make his acting CEO title permanent. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began. "As you know, my uncle's health has—" The main doors of the boardroom swung open. Julian Thorne walked in. He was not in a wheelchair. He was not leaning on a cane. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face set like granite, his eyes blazing with Arctic fury. The boardroom fell into a stunned, tomb-like silence. Marcus Thorne's face turned the color of ash. "Uncle," he stammered, You're supposed to be retired?" Julian said, his voice booming. "Dying? Is that what you were hoping, Marcus?" Julian walked to the head of the table. He didn't ask Marcus to move. He simply stood there, radiating pure, unadulterated power, until Marcus scrambled out of the chair. "For several weeks," Julian announced to the board, "I have been the victim of a systematic, and frankly clumsy, assassination attempt." Gasps filled the room. "My own nephew, Marcus Thorne, has been methodically poisoning me in an attempt to seize control of this company." "That's absurd," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "It's a lie. He's senile. Is it?" Julian said, pressing a button. A large screen descended from the ceiling. For the next 10 minutes, Julian laid out the case. The toxicology reports from Weill Cornell, the second toxicology report from the T, the bank records showing Marcus's shell company, Starlight Hospitality LLC, purchasing the Starlight Diner, the transfer of funds to the new manager, Mr. Clark, with a memo attached. Make her life hell. And finally, a video deposition. Nurse Davies, her face clear and her voice steady, recounting how Marcus Thorne bribed her to administer the poisoned tea. Marcus was hyperventilating, backing toward the door. "Lies, all of it. She's a disgruntled employee. It's a setup." "And what about this?" Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The doors opened again. Olivia Vance walked in. She was not wearing a waitress uniform or hospital scrubs. She was wearing a simple, elegant, dark blue dress. She looked poised, confident, and absolutely terrifying. "This," Julian said to the board, "is Olivia Vance, the woman my nephew tried to ruin because she had the audacity to save my life and spoil his little plan. The woman who, when I tested her with a $100,000 bribe, told my lawyer to go to hell. She is the reason I am alive today. She is the one who uncovered this entire conspiracy." Marcus lunged for the door. 2 uniformed NYPD officers, who had been waiting outside, stepped in and grabbed him by the arms. "Marcus Thorne," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for attempted murder." As his nephew was read his rights, screaming and kicking, Julian Thorne watched him with cold, dead eyes. He was dragged from the boardroom. The room was silent. The board members looked at Julian, horrified and awestruck. Julian straightened his tie. "Well, now that the housekeeping is done, let's get back to business." He turned to Olivia, who was standing by his side. The entire room was focused on her. "This," Julian said to the board, "is what true integrity looks like. This is the character that has been missing from Thorne Dynamics." He faced her. His reaction, the one that would change her life, wasn't a check. It wasn't a car. It was something far more profound. "Ms. Vance," Julian said, his voice now quiet, for her alone, "I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved my life, and you saved my company. I offered you money, and you refused. I offered you security, and you refused. So I'm offering you a job." He turned back to the stunned board. I am dissolving the ethics committee, which clearly has been asleep at the wheel. In its place, I am establishing a new position, Director of Corporate Oversight. This person will have unilateral authority to investigate any department, any executive, including myself. They will answer to no one but this board, and the position's first director is Olivia Vance. Olivia's jaw dropped. Julian, I can't. I'm a waitress. You're a nursing student, he corrected gently. You're trained to spot symptoms, to see the small things that are wrong before they become fatal. That's what I need. Your eyes, your character, he continued. Furthermore, Thorne Dynamics is immediately and fully funding your tuition at Columbia for whatever degree you wish to pursue. Master's, doctorate. It's done. He wasn't finished. And finally, he said, a true smile touching his lips, I am a man who hates loose ends. I still own a certain Starlight Hospitality LLC. As of this morning, I have dissolved it and transferred its sole asset, the Starlight Diner, into a trust. You are the sole beneficiary. It's yours, Olivia. Do with it what you will. Olivia looked at the faces of the most powerful people in New York, all staring at her. She thought of her overdue rent, her nursing textbook, her aching feet. Julian Thorne hadn't just given her money. He had given her power. He had given her a purpose. He had given her a new life, one built not on a handout, but on the integrity he had tried and failed to break. Her life was changed, forever. Olivia Vance's life was changed forever, not by the billionaire's money, but by his respect. She went from serving coffee to running a company, from being a victim to being a protector. She not only finished her nursing degree, but she also transformed the Starlight Diner into a culinary training school for at-risk youth, ensuring that no one with integrity would be left behind. Julian Thorne learned that day that the greatest assets aren't found on a balance sheet, but in the character of an ordinary person forced to make an extraordinary choice. What did you think of Olivia's incredible journey? Was Julian's reaction what you expected? Let us know your favorite twist in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story, please hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves drama, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story.